Hi, my name is Lily and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my December wrap up of all of the books that I read in December. In December I read 11 books. Some of them were audiobooks and some of them were physical. There's only one that I read just via audiobook, so I'll start with that one because I don't have a physical copy to hold up for you. That was Thing by David Walliams. This is a short middle grade novel, kind of fantasy, kind of adventure. Thing is about a young girl who wants everything and her parents always indulge this, and she basically will just have a tantrum until they get her something. And she seems to have almost everything in the world at this point, but she asks for just one more thing. So when her parents look it up and find out that a thing is a very strange and exotic rare creature, they decide they're going to have to go and get it for her, otherwise she's going to lose it. So this book I actually only rated 2 stars. I found it really boring and I was kind of waiting for something exciting to happen, but it was all kind of the same pace. There's no real story mountain to it. I don't think it was helped by the fact that it was incredibly short, and I think the reason it was incredibly short is because there just wasn't much to say about the story. There was no real plot to it. I think this would perhaps be okay for younger children as a bedtime story, but even still, I think I'd rather give my kids something a bit more exciting to read than this one. It's not really a great introduction to the world of David Walliams novels, and I don't really hold much hope for the rest of the ones I have on audiobook now. The other middle grade I read this month was The Midnight Swan by Catherine Fisher. This is the 3rd book in the Clockwork Crow trilogy. I won't tell you too much about this one because I don't want to spoil the other 2 books, but this one is about them trying to finally free the Clockwork Crow from his Clockwork Crow form into a human form again. So this still follows the original characters from the first 2 books. In this one you have Seren, Thomas and the Crow. Seren obviously still remains the main character, but it was nice to see more of Thomas in this one and the Crow. I really enjoy these books. They are really sweet and funny, but they also get to me. They're quite thrillery for me. I do feel a lot of tension from them. They remind me a lot of Coraline in that way that they make you feel very unsettled. Overall, I think I gave this one 4 or 5 stars. It wasn't as strong as the other 2 in the series, but I still really enjoyed it and it was nice to see a conclusion for the trilogy. Now on to the young adult books that I read this month. I read Stardaughter by Shweta Thakrar. This was a buddy read with my friend Livy, and honestly I feel a bit bad because I didn't like this one as much as Livy did. This one I only gave 3 stars. This is a story about a teenage girl called Sheetal. Her mother is a star, which makes her half star. Because of this, she has glowing white hair that she has to hide by dyeing it. She has a boyfriend called Dev, and she finds out that Dev actually knew all along that she was half star and that half stars can inspire people, and he essentially had been using her for inspiration. She's been feeling this call to join the Star Court and this song call, and eventually she realizes she has to go when she accidentally burns her father with her starlight, and she finds out that the only way to heal him is with a star's blood. So she follows the call up into the starry court in the sky, taking her friend Mina with her. And when she gets there, she finds out that there is a big competition to choose the next ruling family of the Star Court. For this, they have each chosen a human person to inspire, and they get an hour to inspire this person to create something new within their field. So there's writers, there's a puppeteer, and there's Sheetal, who is a singer. But of course Sheetal didn't know this was the deal, but they tell her that if she competes for her house, that she can get a drop of Star's blood to take home with her to cure her father. Now this premise sounds amazing and I really had high hopes for this one. I love the idea of it. I love the idea of a star court and how amazing and magical that would feel, and I'd heard there's amazing libraries and all these different parts of the court, but unfortunately for me the writing was really lacking. There wasn't enough description for me and the characters weren't really fully fleshed out. I didn't really care about anyone other than maybe Minal, and honestly Sheetal I didn't like particularly. She was kind of boring, a bit dry, and I didn't really see the romance with her and Dev either. It just was missing something. The writing just wasn't quite there. The first few chapters as well felt very much like a teenager writing a school report story, you know, when you get given that task to write a story for school. It felt like that at the start because of the trying too hard with some of the vocabulary. But I feel like this author's writing is going to improve with time, so if she does come out with any more books, I will be very interested to check them out. The next young adult novel I read was Ink by Alice Broadway, and you might be sensing a theme here. This I also rated, I think, 3 stars. This is a dystopian novel set in an alternative world where all of your big moments in your life are inked onto your skin via tattoos, but there are people that exist in this world called blanks who choose not to tattoo themselves, and the inked people are sort of led to believe through their traditions and their stories that blank people will be going to hell, and that you must be inked to be able to have your soul set free at the end, because you need to keep all of your stories with your body and not with your soul. In this story we follow Leora, who is working towards becoming an inker, who is someone who puts the tattoos onto someone else's body. But recently her father has passed away, and she finds out that some things around her father's life and death are not what she thought, and she has to kind of investigate what's going on and the truth about the blanks. Now, when I picked this book up, I had no idea it was a dystopian. I feel like the blurb on my copy is very misleading and doesn't have much going on in it. I thought it was going to be like a fantasy, but it wasn't. I think that kind of marred the whole story for me. But I also just found it a little bit boring. The idea was very original and I was really excited to see where it was going, but I just didn't feel any of the tension because you could just see exactly where this was going. It followed the like completely predictable dystopian cliches. However, I do think if you are a big fan of dystopian novels, this one would be really good for you. I think this is just me getting bored of dystopian again. I also read West by Edith Patu. This is the sequel to East or North Child, also by Edith Patu. And again, this one was a little bit disappointing. I think I rated it 3.5, so I rounded it down to 3 on Goodreads. And this one, it's just didn't hold up to the brilliance of North Child. North Child is one of my all-time childhood favourites, and this one is set not long after the end of North Child. And I don't want to spoil what that happens at the end of North Child, so I can't really tell you anything about this one without spoiling North Child. So to give you an idea, North Child is about a girl called Rose who is born into a family whose mother is incredibly superstitious. Her mother believes that the direction in which your child is born influences their life, and she wants a child for each point of the compass except North, because she was told that her North-born child would die a death in ice and snow. So Rose is secretly born facing north, and they lied to her whole life and tell her that she was an Eastbourne child. But Rose has always been flighty and definitely has all the traits of a Northbourne child. Then one day a polar bear appears at the door and says that if Rose comes with him to live with him, that he can cure all of the family's problems, including curing her sister who's sick and turning their financial distress around. So Rose decides to go with him, and that's how the first book starts. This book follows on from what happens afterwards. Now, when you read the first book, it's very clear that it was meant to be a standalone novel, and I think that's why this one didn't hold up as well. It just wasn't as strong, the story wasn't there. The first book was based on a fairy tale, and obviously this one isn't, because the first book told the whole of the fairy tale. And I think without that source material, the story just wasn't there. You had a lot of perspectives in this book, and they all kind of blended into one for me. I didn't really know how to distinguish between most of the voices, and that was what I think I really struggled with. But it was still a very engaging read. I liked reading about the characters again and seeing more parts of the world. I really like the level of research that the author puts into all of the different aspects of historical travel that they do. Over Christmas, I also read This Winter by Alice Oseman, and I actually was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this. This takes place before the events of Solitaire and exists within the Solitaire and Heartstopper universe, and it's just a really short novella. This is about Tori and Charlie having a pretty disastrous Christmas after Charlie is released from inpatient care for an eating disorder. Be careful if you're going to read this if you have triggers around eating disorders, because this heavily discusses that topic, but I did really enjoy it, and it's kind of therapeutic to read in a year when Christmas was not how I wanted it to be, and it was kind of a rubbish Christmas, so I really enjoyed that, and it was a very apt year for it. It was nice having another glimpse into Charlie and Tori's worlds and seeing more of Nick as well, because I'd only really read Heartstopper and the other one, Nick and Charlie, that's the other one, the other one's called Nick and Charlie. So it was nice to spend more time with those characters again. I think I rated this one 4 or 5 stars because it was really good and I couldn't really fault it, and honestly I can't wait to read Solitaire at this point. The final young adult book I read this month was The Ask and the Answer by Patrick Ness. This is the second book in the Chaos Walking trilogy, and I'm now currently reading the final book in the Chaos Walking trilogy. So again, can't tell you much about this book specifically because it spoils the first book, The Knife of Never Letting Go, so I will give you a quick summary of that. In The Knife of Never Letting Go, we follow Todd and Violet. Todd is raised in a village of all men, and he is told that there has been a virus that going around that killed all the women, and the result for the men was that they gained this thing called noise, which is where all of their thoughts are broadcast for everyone to hear. So he's led to believe this is the only town on the planet and that none of the women survived. But one day he's walking around in the swamps with his dog Manchi, and he finds a girl named Viola who doesn't have any noise. And when he comes back to his guardians and tells them about this, they tell him he has to go on the run because this is dangerous knowledge. And that's kind of where it goes. It follows Todd and Viola as they're trying to run away from the men of the village who are trying to get them. This is the second book, and it's a very different plot to the first book, but it's so engaging, so fast paced. The writing is just so incredible, like you just don't want to put it down, you want to keep reading. And I love how morally grey everyone is. And I also like how people are calling each other out. There's no like good guy, there's no inherent bad guy, and that just, oh, I love it. I really, really enjoyed it. I liked also that in this book you get to see more of the spackle, who are the native creatures on the planet. So that's really interesting, and really, like, I'm now on the third book and you're seeing them even more. So I just, yes. This series, I know it's very old and a lot of people read it when I was a teenager, but this is very new to me, and I decided to read it because of the movie coming out, and honestly, no regrets, I'd highly recommend it. It's such a fast-paced and gripping series. Okay, so now moving on to the adult novels I read this month. The first one I read is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I gave this one 4 stars because I found it incredibly confusing, and the first sort of half to 30% was very, very confusing and dry, and I didn't understand what was going on. But the second half of this book really, really saves it and brings up that rating by a lot. This follows Gideon, who lives in this sci-fi world where they have these different houses of necromancers in space. She is part of the Ninth House, and what happened was she was falling from the sky, I think, and she was the only survivor, so she was taken on as a ward of the Ninth House, and she has grown up with the princess, I think, basically, of the Ninth House, named Harrowhawk. Harrow gets a message, I guess, from the emperor or king of the whole system, who says that he needs someone... He needs new lictors or lictors, I'm not sure which way it's said, and they're basically like his henchmen, his right-hand men. He needs new ones basically, so he invites all of the princes and princesses from all the different necromantic houses to complete a task to compete to become the next lictor. And so Harrow says to Gideon that if she comes with her and helps her complete this task, that she will set Gideon free, because Gideon is currently indebted to them until she's in her 30s. Gideon reluctantly agrees, and they arrive in this old gothic house on the first planet with all the other reigning people from their different necromantic houses, and they have to try and figure out how they're going to become the lictor. Like I said, on first read, this book is incredibly confusing, but the second half really got me, and even though I still don't understand the world, I feel like the world building was basically non-existent in this book. There just wasn't any. I was so attached to the characters and the story that I kind of want to read the second one, and I've already bought the second one. This is going to be a trilogy, I think, so I think definitely I'm going to read Harrow the Ninth, which is the second book, and we'll see how I feel by the end of that as to whether I'll be reading the third one. The next one I read is an adult romance, and that is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. I read this one because it has Own Voice's autism rep. In this one, Stella is an autistic woman who has had no proper relationships really, and she thinks that the reason that she doesn't have proper relationships is because she doesn't know how to have sex properly. She's partially attributing this to her autism, so she decides to hire a male escort to teach her how to have sex. Michael is struggling to make ends meet because of his mother's medical bills, so he decides to become a male escort to help cover the costs, and he ends up being hired by Stella for this educational experience, I guess. This book is all about Stella and Michael growing closer together as their relationship kind of starts to blur the line between professional and personal, and I really, really enjoyed it. It's quite funny and it's very sweet, and as an autistic woman myself, it was very reassuring to read a book about a man who completely embraces all of her autistic traits and doesn't think any less of her for them, and actually loves her because of them. Stella was an incredibly likeable character for me. I really, really related to a lot of her struggles and to a lot of her joys, and honestly, like, I just want to give her a hug because she's often mistreated by her family, who think that she kind of just needs to push through things. But yes, I really like this one. The only thing I would say is I wasn't expecting it to be as raunchy as it was. Like, I know it's about her learning to have sex, but it almost felt a little bit like it was sex scene after sex scene with a little bit of plot in between the sex scenes, so I kind of wished for a little bit less sex and a little bit more plot, but that's just a personal preference. The final book on this list is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. If you've watched my top books of 2020 list, you'll know that this was my number 2 book for the entire year, and it just squeezed in there at the end. This is an adult horror, and it focuses on a girl named Alex Stern who is offered a free ride to Yale University if she agrees to become part of the society that monitors the other secret societies operating at Yale, because they all take part in blood magic. But of course, it's never going to go as smoothly for Alex as she wants it to. People start to question why she was hired, because she has a very questionable background, including a lot of drug use, and she was the only survivor of a mass murder. The reason she was hired is because Alex can see the Greys, which are essentially ghosts, and she's the only person who can see them without taking a special elixir, and she can also see them in colour, which is very unusual. After Alex is taken on board, a girl is found dead on campus, and she thinks that it's not quite as simple as the authorities are trying to say it is, and that the secret societies were involved, so she tries to investigate. Now, this is just the absolute best, like, it was so good. I started off reading it, and the first 50 pages I was like, I'm not sure about this, but by page 100 I was hooked. I could not stop reading. It is so good. The pacing is amazing, and the switching between present and past for Alex was also really, really interesting, because you get to see so much of her life, and the way the story was unraveling was very clever, because you couldn't really see what was going to happen next. You couldn't really predict much of it, and I really, really liked that. It's another book as well where all of the characters are really morally grey. No one's truly good or bad, and I loved that aspect as well, because I didn't know what anyone was going to do, because in a lot of the books where you have a hero, you know they're always going to do the right thing, but often Alex doesn't, and I really like that element because it just added that complete unknownness to it. I can't recommend this one highly enough. However, if you do have any triggers, please do look up the trigger warnings for this book, because there are an awful lot. So those are all of the books that I read in December. It's safe to say that Ninth House was definitely my best book, and probably Thing was my worst one, but other than that, I really, really enjoyed my reading month. Even though my average rating for that month was not particularly good, it felt good to get through so many books from my TBR, especially some older ones. Let me know down in the comments what books you read in December, and if there's any you'd recommend to me. If you like this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to see more content from me. All of my social media links are down in the description below. If you want to leave me a comment to let me know you were here but you don't have anything to say, leave me a little firework emoji in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!